What's going on, everybody? Patrick Auger here, Mr. Matthew Wells, Mr. Drake Riggs, breaking down the 2020 MMA awards here at the Body Lock. And today we are talking about the Female Fighter of the Year. We had a couple of, discrepancies, I would say, among the staff, but generally we did decide this year that Cris Cyborg is our Female Fighter of the Year. Really taking it, clearly winning versus Hamasaki, who was our number 2, and Xiaonan, who was our number 3. So, boys, let's get into this. Matt, I'll start with you. Give me your take on Cris Cyborg winning the award this year for Female Fighter of the Year.
So I had her as my number 1 because of all of the circumstances surrounding the entry into her 2020 campaign, so to speak, right? Because at the beginning or after her, fight against Felicia Spencer, she was up there in the UFC podium wearing Nunes versus Cyborg 2 t-shirts. And then next thing we know, she's done with the UFC. So that pipe dream is gone, never to be seen, at least in the near future, it seems. And so what do we get? We get her journey over to Bellator, take on Julia Budd, boom, finishes her in the 4th round. And it's like, okay, Cris still got it. Right. Because a lot of people seem to think like when you leave the UFC, it's like your career's done for the most part, which more often than not, I mean, I guess there is some truth to that. But, for her to go over to Bellator, do that to Julia Budd, and then follow it up with another win later on in the year against Arlene Blencowe, I think it was just a great run for her, taking, the best of a bad situation being that she didn't get the opportunity to face Amanda Nunes again like she wanted. So doing what she could to go out there, become a champion again, sort of thing. I don't see how you can argue with it.
Yeah, I had her as my number 1 pick as well. And I'll touch on that a little bit here when we get, through Drake's response. But yeah, it's one of those sad things. You bring up Nunes versus Cyborg 2. I know that's a fight that a lot of us wanted to see. I am sad it's not going to happen. A lot of people did write her off. I'm glad you brought that up because she didn't just beat Julia Budd. She looked dominant, which is a big factor because Julia Budd is no slouch, right? Julia Budd has been the featherweight queen over at Bellator and has done very well. And she dominated Julia Budd start to finish. And that says a lot. She's clearly not done. She's clearly still got all the skills. Drake, where did you rank Cyborg? And what do you think about her winning the award this year?
I think it's fine. I think it was absolutely between her and Hamasaki, and I voted as number 1 for Hamasaki, but then Cyborg is 2, just slightly. I think it's an absolute coin flip. It's one of them. Anybody else I think would have been a bit much, but you got to look at both champions here. One ended up becoming champion to close out their 2021, started by capturing the title. Both phenomenal performances. They had 2 fights, 2 wins. For Cyborg, it was the winning the title and then defending. Hamasaki, earning a title shot and then, winning the title here at the end of the year. And what it came down to for me was just thinking about, the competition and the way they finished, which made it so close for me because Hamasaki, both of her submissions were absolutely beautiful and violent stuff. I mean, the head scissors to close it out, that was just something you do not see, which, the rarity in submissions is what puts them, over the edge for me in terms of submission of the year. So personally, just to put that out there, that was my submission of the year because that you don't see that. I've only seen it once ever before that. It's something crazy. And she did it in a title fight. So that's like bonus points. Cyborg, absolutely dominated Julia Budd. I was there for that one. That was like the last MMA event I was at actually because of everything that happened. So sad to remember that. And then Arlene Blencowe shut her out too and submitted her first submission that she ever got. Not a crazy submission or anything, but a submission nonetheless. So when comparing like Julia Budd to Tomo Maesawa and Arlene Blencowe to like Miyu Yamamoto and everything, I think it's very close, but Tomo kind of lowers it a bit as much as I love Tomo. And yeah, Julia Budd, she hadn't been beaten for so long and everything that I think the Julia Budd win is what kind of put it over for me, like, and just how easily she did it. So it was a coin flip for me in this one, but both phenomenal fighters. And I think either one is justifiable over everybody else. But there just weren't that many fighters who were very active and, at the highest level this year. So it kind of made it easier, but still a coin flip for me in the end. But Cyborg is totally fine for this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the activity because obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic derailing things, UFC was first back to doing events, but even they had a break. And they weren't, if you look at a lot of the events this past year, you've got that repeat cycle of fighters. That's something that they really did through, testing and also just fighters willing to do this in the middle of the pandemic and their personal lives. Lots of reasons for that. But a lot of people didn't fight this year or fought maybe once or twice when normally they'd fight 3 or 4 times. And so that really made this one tough. I know for me, just as you said, it was kind of a coin toss between Hamasaki and Cyborg. I gave it to Cyborg as my number 1 pick because of the level of competition I thought with Bud, looking how good she had looked until she go into that fight, and she just gets, wrecked by Cyborg. Cyborg didn't miss a beat at all. And that to me slightly gave her the edge over Hamasaki, despite, again, beautiful submission on the New Year's Eve Ryzen show, and nothing to take away from Hamasaki's great year. It's just, for me, you got to go with Cyborg in this case. I think another thing to look at is, Lauren Murphy is, when we're talking about activity, Lauren Murphy was on the ballot, and she fought the most out of any female fighter, as far as I know, at 3 times in a year. That's what we were looking at in terms of activity. So it was hard to pick. Do either of you think that the activity, had we had, say, a normal year, that we'd be looking at a different, top ballot of choices here, especially if, Cyborg and gets another shot, if Valentina or Nunes fights again? What is that looking like in your guys' mind?
Well, Nunes was supposed to fight. Remember? She was supposed to have that second fight in this year. So that definitely would have changed things if she didn't pull out and then, of course, won. But I don't know. It depends on how that goes, of course. And, against Megan and Felicia, take those for what people will. Valentina, she had the injury too. So I don't know if she would have fought multiple times this year, actually. More than she did. She fought twice. But and then as I think that Weili was probably affected the most by this stuff going on, unfortunately, because there's been really no hold up on her end besides opponents and worldwide circumstances and everything that keeping her from fighting more than once. And it is such a shame that she only fought once this year. And hopefully that is not the case going forward, because she is too good and too valuable for all fans in the business, to be held on the sideline like that. So I think she was probably most affected, just to give a good answer for that.
Absolutely. If Weili had the opportunity to fight again, I think she's hands down your fighter of the year, because she had fight of the year with Xiaonan. So let her get one more win and defend that belt. And I mean, it's a no-brainer. She would have easily been fight of the year for me just on those 2 things alone. I don't care if that second fight ended up being like the most boring 5-round snooze fest ever. Sorry, still fight of the year for me. But, COVID is a thing, and that's what, sucked about this year. And that's why also, activity really didn't weigh into my decision in the voting all that much. I did slide Lauren Murphy in at 3, but I wasn't looking for just activity when it came to fight of the year, like compared to other years. Other years, I'm like, all right, who's got 4 wins? That's where I'm starting off with. This year, I'm just like, okay, who had the most memorable sort of things? And at least if he fought twice, that was kind of my deal.
Yeah, no, I mean, where I was going with that, why I asked is exactly what you brought up, Matt, is, Weili only got to fight once. She had what we deemed the fight of the year. I think barring a loss or like the worst, like a Derek Lewis Ngannou type fight, which I can't see ever happening with Weili, I think she pretty much gets, female fighter of the year easily, hands down, especially if that young Jacek fight. So I think that was the one for me that but it was, again, hard because she only fought 1 time. I couldn't give it to her given those circumstances. And that's who I would have probably given female fighter of the year to otherwise. So let us know in the comments who you think the female fighter of the year is. If we got it right with Cyborg, if you think it's Valentina, if you think it's Hamasaki, Xiaonan, whoever, let us know. We love to hear from you. Want to know what you guys think about this. Anything to wrap this up, boys? Or I think we've kind of hit every aspect of this almost.
I'll just add in. I think a lot of people will have Valentina on their radar when it comes to the female fighter of the year, just because of 2 title defenses. But I mean, they were. it was like a thing where nobody really expected her to lose. So it was kind of like she just went out there and showed up for work and went home, sort of thing. Like there wasn't really any drama. No disrespect to her opponents, but I mean, she was a heavy favorite and walked away with the belt. So. What more can you say about that? I mean, she definitely deserves to be in the conversation for sure in this crazy year. But, if you have her as your number one, I'm not going to argue too much with you. But for me, there was other elements, that came into play, like with the Cris Cyborg thing. So.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. It's, there's expectations there, right? And Valentina being Valentina and the quality of the opponents, nothing to take away from Chookagian or Jennifer Maia, but it's one of those things where if she lost, I think whoever beat her might be in contention for Fighter of the Year, right? So that's kind of, it's tough, but I know Drake's got some thoughts on this, so I'll let you wrap this one up.
Well, I even though her performances were good and kind of typical Valentina, outclassing shutouts for the most part, maybe not so much the Maia fight as much as the Caitlyn one. I just don't think that they were as impressive of performances compared to Hamasaki and Cyborg. They went out and Chookagian got finished, but like, I don't know, it just wasn't as spectacular to me compared to the other two. Like not very close at all. What was it? A crucifix with ground and pound. I mean, just, I don't know. It didn't do it for me in terms of the overall results compared to what these other two ladies did. Like they did phenomenal in both of their fights, just bell to bell. Whereas, Valentina, it's a Valentina performance, right? I mean, it's good. It's what you expect, but I don't know, just much more impressed with the other two. And I will leave it with a shout out for activity to Xi Ming, who had 4-0 4-0 this year to the prospect from China. So I'll leave you with that.
Shout out to Xi Ming getting that 4-0. That's the way to do it. We'll see what happens next year.
Mm-hmm.